everybody, welcome to my January reading wrap-up. This month really started off good. I ended up reading 10 books. I think it's 10. We're missing one more, but that's on my Kindle. 10 books this month. Let's get into it. Before we start the video, I do want to put a little disclaimer. I know that there's going to be people watching this who maybe read one book last month or maybe read 25 books last month, and that is okay. We all have our different pace that we read. We all have our different time availability to read. 10 books is actually insane for me since I am still in school and working and have so many other things going on, but I really prioritized reading this month, which I felt really good about, and so I'm excited to share all of the books. It was a really good reading month for me. So my first book I read was She Gets the Girl. I'll put it somewhere over here. I read it on my Kindle. It's the only book that wasn't a physical copy. This book is also written by the authors of 5 Feet Apart. This book was written by a lesbian couple, and they actually based this story off of how they met and how they fell in love, which I found out about halfway through and made reading this book feel so much more special because you could almost feel how real the whole situation felt. This book was a cheesy sapphic romance about two college-aged girls. They're kind of helping each other in different ways. One girl's trying to win back her girlfriend. The other is trying to have this girl fall in love with her. And while they're both working on separate things, they end up liking each other a lot more than they thought they would. And it's like an enemies to lovers, but the enemies are just like kind of petty towards each other. There's a lot of really good banter. I really loved Molly as a character. I ended up rating this book 3 stars. I do want to explain that. I will never rate a romance above 3 stars unless it like knocks my socks off. I think about it for the next month, like truly deeply affected me. And this one was just cute and fun. And so it's gonna be a 3 star. It was great. 3 stars does not mean it was a bad book. It means it was a great book. But it was just a romance, so I'm not gonna sing too many praises. The second book that I read this month is Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, but this is my current favorite author. This is the second or third book I've read from her, and each one has just blown me away. I don't tab my books like ever, and I was every other page. I was like, okay, I gotta highlight this. I gotta like keep this. I have thought about this book every day since I finished it because it is like I would call it a dark academia historical fiction book, but it does dabble in a little bit of magic. So you follow the story of Robin Smith, who is a now orphaned boy in China who is taken from China to England by a professor at Oxford. And the professor isn't necessarily a father figure to him, but does give him a house and clothes and tutors him and teaches him Latin and Greek and a bunch of languages. And he gets into Oxford University and works for a special section of the school called Babel, the Babel Tower, which is similar to in the Bible, just a tower where they research languages and they connect them and they use those connections to make magic. And that magic is what runs the city. And it's very interesting. At the beginning, it was a little difficult to get into the magic system, but once it's clicked, you're good. This also takes place in the 1800s, so a little bit different from what I normally read. I do love historical fictions and I want to read more, but they're very hit or miss for me. This is also the same author of The Poppy War, which I read last month. I think either November, December, and I loved. I just thought it was beautiful. Such a good story, such a sad, when I say good, I mean sad. I mean like heart-wrenching, heartbreaking. I cried. Made me rethink things I never had thought of before, and that's what a good book should do. So This is like genuinely one of my favorite books ever, and I want to reread it, and I will reread it, and I recommend it to everyone because you can learn so much from this. Anyway, it was a 5 stars. Oh, I didn't say that. 5 stars. Like, I would give it a 6 star if I could. Next, I was like, okay, that's a lot. That was so much to process. I need like a palate cleanser. So I read A Court of Frost and Starlight. I love the ACOTAR series. Sarah J Maas is a pretty good author. And I flew through the other books. I finally got to this one, and it was cute, and it was sweet, and it was the aftermath of the War of Hybern, and we just got to see so many more characters' point of view. There's not much to it, but it's also not bad. I gave it 4 stars, and I think I gave it 4 stars because of how connected I felt to these characters. If you didn't love the last 3 books, you wouldn't like this, obviously. So this one was fantasy, and I gave it 4 stars. This one I was probably most excited for. I started the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas. After I finished A Court of Frost and Starlight, I was on the Sarah J Maas kick, and I've had this book for like 2 months now, and wanted to like dedicate a whole day to actually like read this and just dive into it, and I did have it. I've been getting more into tabs, which is exciting. So this is fantasy. I ended up giving this 4 stars as well. I was told that I'm gonna like this series more than ACOTAR. ACOTAR has been a pretty 5-star series so far, so I am excited to fully get into this just in universe. I know that Throne of Glass is YA, and there is not really any smut, which is great because I'm not a big smut person. Like, I want my fantasy to be strictly fantasy, and this does it. This did it well. So I should tell you what it's about, probably. We're following the story of Selena Sardothian. I'm not sure you say that. And she is a like world-renowned assassin. She is known for being this like bloodthirsty, brutal killer. But people don't really know who she is. They don't know that she's a 18-year-old girl. I think she's 18. She's like 18 or 19. This young girl. She gets captured by the king of the Throne of Glass, cough cough, series name. And they make a deal with her. They're like, hey, you will get your freedom if you enter this competition and you win, and then you get to be like the king's hand. So basically she's just like a lapdog for the king, and she will like run and do orders and kill people for him. So she agrees, and she's kind of coached by the captain of the guard and the crown prince, Dorian, who's honestly a really cool character. Out of all the characters in this book, I loved Cole the most, or Cal, Choal. He was such a great character, and he seemed to have a lot of depth, and I liked the way he talked about Selena and his POVs, and just how he cared for her. I imagined him as like a gentle giant. But I went into this thinking it was going to be a very basic fantasy book, something like The Serpent and the Wings of Night, because it was like this whole tournament situation we've seen before. And oh my gosh, there was so many like side stories and side aspects and like lore that came out of nowhere, and it all fit together so nicely. So I give this 4 stars. It has the potential to be higher. I've heard that the first 3 books in this series are like okay, and then it gets good. So if this is just okay, I'm so excited to read the next 12 whatever books. This next one is so controversial, guys. I love you guys. And don't leave me here, okay? Because I'm going to explain. The next book I read was Fourth Wing. Fantasy book. We've all heard of it. It was probably the biggest book in 2023 for fantasy girlies. I gave it a 3 stars. And before you click off the video, let me explain. I think this is a great fantasy for someone who's never read a fantasy book in their entire life. Okay? As someone who really likes fantasy and reads mostly fantasy, this book kind of sucked. I'm not going to go too much into it because in about a week I will have a completely spoilers included reading vlog going up where I just tell you every single detail about this book, and all of my thoughts and feelings on it. But for right now, 3 stars. I didn't really like Violet. The plot had so many holes and like was very clumpy and not cohesive. And it did feel like every other YA fantasy stitched together. But if you want to hear more about that, I'll have a video up soon. This is where my books took a turn. So far it was just a lot. This is where my books took a turn. So far it was just a lot of fantasy. It was mostly fantasy. And then I picked up Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And we just like switched routes for the rest of the month. So Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid is about Carrie Soto. It was a really young tennis star up until her 30s. And she was like world famous, held the record for everything, so well known. And then she retired. And this is the perspective leading up to that. And then also when she comes out of retirement because another young tennis player is threatening to take over her record. I gave this 5 stars. This is my second 5-star book of the month. I don't even like have the words to describe how much I loved this. Taylor Jenkins Reid is my favorite author, I think, of all time. I only have 2 more books after this of hers to read, and then I've read everything, and I don't even want to think about what's gonna happen after that. I feel like I can't read any more books if there's not like hers to look forward to, because of how much her books have impacted me. Holy crap. Anyway, I digress. We're talking about this one. I don't like tennis. I'm not into tennis, okay? After this book, I was like, maybe I should watch tennis, because she writes it in such an interesting way. You can feel the tension in her words the entire time. And she doesn't just have, like, Carrie Soto isn't just battling like tennis. This isn't just about tennis. This is about her relationship with herself and how she sees herself and her like not self-doubt, but just her need for more all the time to an unhealthy extent. This also talks about how that impacts her relationships with others and how she is an almost 40-year-old woman and she's never had more than like a one-night stand. And then the most heart-wrenching part of this book was her relationship with her father after her mother died when she was very young. How that changed and just turned into so many different things. And I started reading this in a cafe and I was like, oh, I'll just sit down, I'll read the whole thing. I had to leave because I was getting emotional and was crying, and I can't do that in public, so I had to come back and finish it. And I'll put a picture on the screen of what I looked like when I was done with this. I haven't cried this much over a book in months. Like, there was a point at the very end, I was probably 50 pages away, and I would have to stop reading because I was crying so hard that I couldn't see the pages. Please read this. Please read this. Please. Even if you've never read a TJR book, if you don't care about tennis, if you don't even read like women's literature, read this, please. Next, I read This Is How You Lose the Time War. It is a sci-fi book, and I rated it 4 stars. I read this so quickly. It's addicting. So you follow 2 time-traveling spies, and I know you're like, hold on, what does that even mean? I don't know. But there's 2 spies. One Red works for, that's their names. Red works for one agency, Blue works for another agency. And they're like trying to corrupt each other by going through different strands of time and changing things. And then the other one will go back behind them and change it to something else. And one of them ends up leaving a letter, and it says burn before reading. And they read it anyway, and you just start this insane friendship, romance between these 2 spies. I can't even explain it. The writing is beautiful. I have never read a book where I'm just like highlighting everything. I'm like, I'm gonna tattoo this all over my body, every single word. Let me read you my favorite excerpt from this. This is Blue is reading a letter from Red, and this is how she explains, this is how she writes about it. Instead, she stirs the spoon empty into the tea and watches as the leaves unclump, swirl, spindle into letters. Each rotation is slow, and she marks paragraph breaks with small sips. Every sip undoes the letter until she swirls them into meaning again. What? Why are you allowed to write that good? You're not allowed to write this good. Honestly, I think this might even be a 5-star for me because of how much I've thought about it since I finished it. I don't even know. Please read it. Please read it. Next book is Authentically Izzy by Pepper Basham. This is a romance book. It is a romance between two very enthusiastic book lovers who are kind of to themselves. They have higher standards. They can't really find love the normal way like everybody else. And they have a lot of pressure from their family to get married, to start a family, to settle down. Izzy, our main character, her sister puts her on a dating app and she gets a match, and it's this guy who also really loves that book or that movie, and they end up discussing it and becoming great friends, and they just develop this insane connection over emails and messages. And we find out that he actually lives in England. I believe it's England. It's either England or Scotland. She decides that he is worth it. He comes to visit her, and just a super cute romance story. Very cute. This guy, Brody, dream guy. I need a Brody in real life who doesn't live in England. Please. There's a lot of references in this book, which normally I don't like, but it's Izzy and she speaks like book nerds speak, so I feel like it's acceptable. And it was a very like giggly book. Like the whole time I'm just like giggling, kicking my feet, blah blah blah, twirling my hair. This is romance, and I gave it 3 stars. Like I said, any romance isn't gonna get above a 3-star for me, so this is really good. It's just still romance. Hello, it's been a few days since I recorded the video, and I went to go edit it, and the screen was just completely zoomed in for the last 2 books, so I decided that I didn't want to post 5 minutes of my forehead on the internet, so I'm redoing it. I just have 2 more books left to go through, so here we go, I guess. Second to last book I read in January was Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. This was recommended to me after I finished Tender is the Flesh for more like weird, semi-gruesome stories. And I really wasn't sure what was gonna happen. I didn't read the back of it before I bought it. Purely vibes when I bought this book. And it ended up being a story about a 24-year-old Jewish girl who like doesn't practice very much anymore. The story kind of follows her relationship with her mother, who's very overbearing and helicopter mom, her relationship with food and like how her eating disorder has affected her daily life and how she views other people. And that part I was like, okay, see what's happening. Then we meet Miriam, who's a very Jewish and grotesquely fat, the words the book uses, worker at this froyo shop. And her and Rachel have this friendship that is very strange and almost like an unhealthy obsession on Rachel's part. I don't want to like ruin anything, but definitely read the trigger warnings. Please know what you're getting into when you start this. I did end up rating it 3 stars just because it didn't feel as impactful as I think it is supposed to be, to me at least. The last book I read in January was You Have a Match by Emma Lord. I started this like January 30th, and was like, I can breeze past it in a day. And it was very lighthearted. It's a YA adventurous romance-esque book. I rated this 3 stars because if it's a romance, it's gonna be 3 stars. Honestly, maybe even like 2.5. And it's not because it was bad. It was a great story. It just wasn't, it didn't draw me in. I wasn't compelled to like read fast, you know? But it is about this young girl named Abby who signs up for a DNA test and finds out that she has a secret biological sister that her parents have never told her about. So she reaches out to Savvy and they decide to go to the same summer camp so they can kind of unravel this mystery of why they never knew about each other. During that, we get a little bit of the main character's romantic history and Savvy's romantic history, and it was just a very cute story, a very light way to finish off the month. Alright, that was all 10 books that I read in January. Sorry that this was out a little later than I wanted it to be. College is killing me. But hopefully next month we'll actually be on time with this wrap-up video. I hope you liked everything. Make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment if you've read any of these books or have opinions on them. I will see you guys later. Bye.